welcome to Beyond the Paradigm. My guest today is researcher Max Igan. Max is a popular speaker in the truther community, and I'm sure you'll find this topic today that we're going to be discussing very fascinating. If you do enjoy the topic, can I first of all ask you to give the video a like? And secondly, if you do enjoy content like this, please subscribe to the channel. Well, Max, all the way in Acapulco, it's a pleasure to welcome you onto Beyond the Paradigm for the first time.
Nice to be here, brother. Thanks for asking me on. I hope I'm awake and aware enough for the interview, but we'll see how
I'm
we go.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. I know it's definitely an interesting topic what we're going to talk about today. But for the benefit of those of my audience who possibly haven't heard you talk before on this topic and possibly haven't heard you speak at all about anything, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what sort of led you to, well, took you to Mexico really, and to, I know you've got your own website and everything. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my background is basically a social misfit and musician. That's what I did most of my life. I got kicked out of all my schools by the third year of high school. I've been through four schools, and so I kind of left the system and lived on the outside for most of my life, which afforded me the opportunity to travel and look at a lot of ancient history and a lot of historical sites and all that sort of stuff, go around the world and actually get paid to do it, which was great. And it was kind of always a hobby for me to look at the dark workings of the mechanism, everything that lay behind what we can see. And of course, when 9/11 happened, like so many other people, I figured, hang on, this is serious. I need to start speaking out and spreading the word and trying to get people to wake up to where we're headed. So, it's sort of born out of necessity. As someone once said, you don't become a dissident as a career choice. You become a dissident because there's a need for you to do so. And so that's what I do. I mean, I'm just trying to wake people up. And there's so many aspects to this as well. I mean, the control system that we're under, the way they've hidden our history, the way they're hiding the present, the way we don't get the truth from the media, everything that's going on is it's very drastic. We're in a state of clear and present danger. And so, yeah, I figured it can't hurt speaking out. I mean, it has to be done. So I really couldn't be in possession of the knowledge that I've managed to gather over the years and not share it with people. I mean, what's the point? So that's what I do. Like so many others, like yourself. The environment that we're in now, the psychological environment and the political environment that we're in now, creates the need for people to start raising their voices and being heard and discussing topics which are probably not acceptable among most people, but it needs to be done. So here we are doing it, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's when people say to me, "Oh, well, what are you going to do about these things?" And I say, "Well, I'm doing something. I'm raising awareness, and the more of us that do it, obviously it spreads because they've got control of the media. These people who are lying to us, and I suppose we've got
Well,
to
that's
counteract
that's the
them."
key. That's the key to the whole thing is the control of information, and speaking out and making your voice heard is doing something. When people say, "What are you doing?" They expect there's going to be some revolutionary movement or whatever. They can't understand that the control system that they're enslaved to is simply an idea. It's a meme. It's just this concept that authority is real. And as I've often said, even if authority is real and the people currently running our governments and media establishments have the authority that we've given to them, well, they've abdicated that privilege in the last 5 years. I mean, look what they've done through this scamdemic. Look what they're doing with these wars in Ukraine, in Gaza, everything that's going on. There isn't any politician on earth that I would say has legitimate authority. And the only reason that they continue to do what they do is because people don't talk about it. People just go on and watch their football teams and their sports events, and they go and vote for a new side of the coin every 4 years. And it's important that people see that we are the solution. We are the ones that hold the whole system up. It's a house of cards. And if we stop believing in authority and start asking the right questions and work to hold these people accountable and expose what they're doing and talk about it, well, that's the way out of the mess. People just can't see it. A lot of people want some revolutionary movement where, Paul Breckman will go out and save the world and I'll hold his coat while he does it. And then I'll get the newsletter that tells me it's safe to go outside now. and then they'll go
Mm.
back to their mundane jobs and doing their mundane things and everything that led us to this point anyway.
Mm.
So, but if they were to change their own perspective, the whole system has to change around them. And so it's important to do what you're doing, what I'm doing, all the people that are speaking out about this. It's important. And what it's about is presenting information and facts to people. It's not exalting yourself as some sort of a truth guru and a leader or anything like that. It's encouraging people to lead themselves. And now's the time we've got the opportunity to do that. I mean, there's never been a time in history where the system's been laid as bare as it is now. If you can't see what's going on, well, I don't know. I mean, the internet's been there for 30 years. So if you're still asleep, well, there's something terribly wrong. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely something terribly wrong with some people. I mean, the way I see it is, I'm just planting seeds. That's all I'm going to do is plant a seed of doubt maybe in someone's mind. And like you said, I'm not some truth guru who's got all the answers or whatever. But I mean, tragically, a lot of people I speak to, they just seem willfully blind to everything that's going on. It's like a willful blindness. It's almost like that if they accept some of the things that I'm telling them, like about the COVID scandemic, that it was fake. There wasn't a COVID vaccine, a COVID virus. It was just they just invented it. It was probably just flu, and they changed its name to give it more potency and build up the fear. That if they accept that, then they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to sort of change how they live. And a lot of people are frightened. They're frightened, like
Mm.
you mentioned. They're watching the football, they're going out drinking, and all this. It's trinkets. It's the Roman circus that's keeping their attention from the things that really matter. And like we've just had an election over here. We know it's a selection. Keir Starmer, I was saying it for months before, Randall be the next prime minister. He is the next prime minister because he's a globalist, and that's what they want. And it's all control. But you tell people this, they look at you blankly. They had a guy, people going around, don't know how they do it in where you're from, but basically, when there's an election, they always have the little minions going out, bringing the leaflets round to people's houses and everything. And there was a guy came to my door the day of the election in the morning from Labour. He was a Labour guy, tried to hand me this leaflet. And when I started to tell him about Keir Starmer, the World Economic Forum, who was a member of the Trilateral Commission, he was stunned. But then he was just like, it was almost like everything I'd said, he'd erased it immediately and then just carried on with his spiel. And it's just
Mm.
tragic to see these people. Um, Now, obviously, we're going to get into now sort of hidden history. So, what I would say to you is this. In your opinion, I know you've done a lot of research on this, would you say that the history we've been taught is mostly true, or whether, and I ask this to every guest when I'm talking about history, would you say it's mostly true, it's 50-50, there's some truth, some lies, or would you say that it's like a complete fabrication?
Pretty well a complete fabrication. I mean, in the last 50 years, perhaps 50% of what we've been told is true. When it gets back to 100 years, I'd say maybe 25% of it is true. And before 100 years, it's all fabricated. It's all rubbish. It's a very important topic. And what you were saying before about, people getting this glazed look over their face when you try to tell them about this stuff, it's just cognitive dissonance. A lot of people, a lot of it is it's very confronting for them to realize that they've been living a lie for their entire life. You get to someone who's 40 or 50 years old and they realize that all those jobs they had and all this stuff, it's all been a complete lie. Like with my sister used to say I was a rebel without a cause. I was a conspiracy theorist. I was this and I was that. And she worked hard her whole life. She had a couple of marriages. She worked hard and she dreamed of having the perfect family and a two-story house and the white picket fence and all that sort of stuff. And she got to a stage in her life where she was about, excuse me, she was about maybe 50 years old or 50 something. And she looked at herself. She just stopped one day and she looked at what she was doing. She went, and then she looked at me and she went, "My God, my little brother has just been been his own person for his whole life, and I've struggled and worked really hard to make ends meet and to get to that place. And he's better off and he's happier than I am. What's going on?" And she went, And look at him, he's got this YouTube channel and thousands of people listen to his videos. What's he saying? You know, so she played one of my videos and then she went, oh my God, he's right. You know, and she completely woke up. But it's the same thing. It's cognitive dissonance. People don't want to believe that what they've been working for is a smokescreen. It's a cloud. It's a myth. I mean, you're never going to get to that place that they tell you you're going to get to. Yeah, and what it's really all about is your discovery of yourself. And they've hidden everything from us, which might lead to that. And yeah, the history that we're taught is just basically all of ancient history. And like I said, anything before about 100 years is a complete fabrication. And even in the last 100 years, I mean, some of the stuff they told us about World War One and World War Two, sure, there were wars, but they weren't based on what they told us they were based on, and they didn't happen the way we were told they happened. And it's the same with everything. I mean, you can start looking at the news now. Once you become aware of it, you look at the news and you can just see that it's a theatre show, it's a puppet show, it's a stage show. They make it all up, and it's all about leading you towards this one point of total control. And when you realize that's what the goal is complete control of everything, control of every grain of sand, every drop of water, every blade of grass, every living creature, and not only control of them physically, but also control of them mentally. You know, mold your mind, teach you what to think, not how to think. And that's where we've been brought to. This is something I was warning the fellow students in my high schools about when I was 17 years old. I was looking at it going, every time the government brings in a new piece of legislation, it leads us down a certain direction. It takes more of our rights away. And if we continue in this direction, we're going to be living in 1984 pretty soon, and everything I said was true. And I've been aware of this my whole life, which is why I got kicked out of all those high schools. In 3 years, I got kicked out of 4 high schools because I was arguing with my teachers. And it's imperative that people see what's going on. And like I said, it's really one of the most opportunistic times in human history because the workings of the system have been laid bare. We can see history is a lie now. Sorry. All of the ancient history stuff. I mean, I was right into ancient history. That's what actually got me into this when I was 8 years old. My mother showed me a picture of the pyramids and said they don't know how anyone built them, and I found that to be fascinating. So I got, put down all the comic books and I was right into looking at ancient ruins and monuments and all that sort of stuff. And I'd travel all around the world to go and see all these ancient sites. And then when you really start looking at your own cities that you live in our own countries, you see, hang on, what's this building? Why is this building so different to all the other buildings? And you realize that the old world that we're looking for exists right in our backyard, all around the world. You don't have to travel overseas to see ancient history. It's right there in London, it's there in Brisbane, it's there in Sydney. It's in the Philippines, it's in Japan, it's everywhere, right under your nose if you can just look at it with the right sort of eyes. So that's been a huge awakening for a lot of people. And yeah, it's important that we get some focus on this, brother, and it's important that we see how much we're lied to, and it's important that we take this opportunity to reclaim our world.
Yeah. I mean, you're from Australia and I'm an Englishman, and I would imagine, right, you've been told a similar type of history to me that basically Australia, from England, we sent some prisoners there and they basically built the nation. That's
Mm.
pretty much in a nutshell what we were told. We were told that, and I'm sure that's what you were told. But that's not true,
Yeah.
is it?
It's not possible. It's absolutely not possible. Even when you go and look at some of the early buildings and things there, something that I often use as an example in Sydney, there's a place called Queen Victoria Markets. This is an incredible building. It's got big copper domes on top. It's a very, very ornate building. And they say this was completed in 1820. And when you look at some of the early shots of Sydney in the 1800s and 1820, it's remarkable the look of this place. Now you look at the official story. Well, we brought convicts out here, and there was just a whole bunch of Aboriginals running around with spears and woomers and things like this, and they didn't have any civilization at all. They're just nomads. Okay, so that's what happened. We brought sailing ships with prisoners that came here and set up prison colonies. What about the Queen Victoria building? So when these prisoners arrived in Australia, obviously they must have all been incredible stonemasons. Obviously, they had this ability, and they must have used the earth-moving equipment that they brought with them on the first fleet. So that the first thing they did when they got here was they dug a quarry, huge quarry, and they built a brick factory so they could make these incredibly ornate European style bricks, so they could build these incredibly magnificent structures like Queen Victoria Markets, as you do when you're colonizing a country with prisoners. You know, it doesn't make sense at all. It really doesn't
No.
make sense. And like I said, look, it's right in front of your face. When you look at it through the right pair of eyes, it's right in your face. Why do all the buildings, all our government buildings, are they in Greco-Roman style? Is it actually Greco-Roman style? I mean, why, what with these pillars and these gargoyles and these arch tops and all this sort of stuff? Why are they the same in the Philippines and the same in Japan and the same in Europe and the same in America? Why do we all build our government buildings to look like the same thing? And why did we build these all incredibly ornate buildings as we were colonizing a country with prisoners? It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. Obviously, this architecture was already here, and we just came and repopulated it. We just came and took over. Nothing they tell us is true. And like I said, the evidence of it is right in front of your face if you can just look at it with the right kind of eyes.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, you can go anywhere. Like you don't need to go to other countries. You can look around your own country and
Mm.
just
Just go downtown. Go into town.
yeah,
Go into Mexico City. You'll find the same buildings in Mexico
yeah,
City. What are they doing there? You know?
yeah. I mean, I was just in Liverpool 2 days ago in the northwest of England, and I came out of the train station, Liverpool Lime Street Station, and immediately when you come out, you're confronted with a number of magnificent buildings, and in particular one called St. George's Hall. Now, that's got the massive columns. It's a massive building. But one of the things I noticed is I walked over to it. You know, just come out of the station, go across the road. And the first thing I did, I went round the side of the building and up the steps. And there is a huge door. It's humongous. I did a video on it and put it on TikTok. And my question was, why are doors this size on this building? And if you go around the front, there's another two sets of doors. One's slightly smaller, but it's still maybe 14 feet high. And then there's another one that's approximately 10 feet wide and probably 20 feet high. So my question was, why are these buildings here? Firstly, because they're out of place. When you look at the rest, there's a number of them. Why are they here? Who built them? And why are these doors massive? Do you know what I mean? That so
Mm.
I'm stood there for quite a while watching people just oblivious walking by, and I seem to be the only person looking at this building, thinking, "What's going on?" But like you said, you need the eyes to see, don't you?
Mm.
Um,
And once you
so
see, you can't unsee it. That's the thing. I
mm,
mean, these giant doors and giant buildings, huge roofs. Why are there libraries that contain books that are 6 or 7 feet high? Whole libraries of giant books. What are they doing there? I mean, I
mm,
can understand maybe someone would build a giant book for a novelty thing, but why are there whole libraries of them?
mm,
What's going on here? I mean, yeah, obviously history is a fabrication, and there was definitely a race of quite large people who lived here. I mean, you can even find photographs from like 100 years ago of what we would call giants, people that are 14 feet high, and I would suggest they're not even the ones that we're talking about were actually even taller than that. I
yeah.
think there's been resets after resets, and there was some quite gigantic people living around here not so long ago, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a Christian and I believe what it says in Genesis 6 about the Nephilim. Absolutely, there were giants walking around, and like you said, some of them were massive. We don't know how big, but some of them would have been massive. And you talked about resets there, and I had a previous guest on who's a biblical archaeologist, and he said it's sort of been mooted, but they believe there's been probably 16 resets. That's sort of an estimate of how many. So that I mean that's quite a lot really when you think about it. And I just
Well,
can't
you look at
accept that.
people like look at people like Jason Breshears. Sorry to interrupt, but people
Yeah.
like Jason Breshears who says that there's a reset every 138 years. Would be
Mm.
possible. Who knows?
Well, definitely there's a lot. I mean, one thing I know is this that there's a lot I don't know. In fact, there's more that I don't know than I do know. And I'm just simply asking questions. And this is part of the reason for the podcast is I'm asking questions of people like yourself. So in your opinion then, right? So we clearly there's a civilization, an advanced civilization that's come before us. And it's been postulated that this civilization is possibly Tartaria. So for those who might not have heard of it, I know a lot of people are gonna have heard of Tartaria or the Tartarian Empire. Could you give us sort of a breakdown, like sort of what are we talking about here? What size was this empire? Who are these people? What are the sort of origins?
Well, even calling it Tartaria is in a way it's kind of it's not correct. I mean it's kind of a misdirection. There was an area of Europe, of the European continent, which was Western Europe, which encompassed Russia, India, Mongolia, China, lots of places, except for Europa, really, that was called Tartaria. This contained a lot of ancient infrastructure and it seemed to have ties all around the world. So, like, we're calling this lost civilization Tartaria, for want of a better word, really. Tartaria simply refers to the section of the Western European continent. But what we find is that there was obviously a worldwide cooperative culture that existed on the earth. Otherwise, you wouldn't find these buildings all over the place. You wouldn't find the same architecture. You wouldn't find this stuff in across the European continent, plus also in the Philippines, in South America, in North America, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Japan, all over the place. So it was obviously a cooperative culture. That's basically the name we're giving it. But it was a culture that had free electricity. Buildings used to actually generate electricity, what people would call Tesla technology. And they still do, they still can. You know, etheric energy is all around us. The whole world is it's an electrical world, it's an electrical universe. Everything you experience in your body is through electrical impulse. You know, hearing these words, it's just a message that your ears pick up and they send an electrical impulse to your brain. When you touch something, it's the same thing. It's all electricity. The electricity all around us, that prana that you see at night when the lights go out and you see all that static electricity in the air, that's the energy of this earth, and that energy can be tapped into. It's abundant, it's all around us. And that's basically the way our civilizations used to run. When you look at the artistic nature and the sheer magnificence of some of these ornate buildings that were constructed, I mean, you begin to see that we weren't working 9 to 5. We weren't having to pay to be alive. We weren't on a clock or any of that sort of stuff. If you're working on a clock, there's no way you're going to build something like, St. George Cathedral or anything like that. And even the word cathedral, it's a cathode. It's electrical. Even churches, I would suggest a lot of these churches weren't places of worship. They were energy buildings. They were places of healing. You can go into some of these huge churches and they've got the organs there, four organs around the church. And when you stand in the middle of the church in that standing wave that you get from the four organs, it literally heals your body. That's why it's called organ music, because it heals your organs. I mean, there's so much stuff that's right there in our face. Like I said, when you see it with the right kind of eyes, you can't unsee it. But we're calling the civilization Tartaria, for want of a better word. And but what we're seeing is it was a worldwide cooperative culture. There was also a worldwide language that existed up until a couple of hundred years ago as well, which was the root language of Hungarian, which is Magyar. And you'll find that when the East India Trading Company and the pirates and all these people went out, if that story is even true, if it happened in the timeline that they tell us anyway, and I think it's true to a degree, but I don't think the timelines are right with anything. What their main goal was destroying island cultures, destroying anything and any race that still spoke Magyar, because the world can't know that there was one root language for this whole earth, because that shows we lived in a cooperative culture. They promote the concept that it's always been a feudalistic culture. We need governments, we need kings, we need nations, we need all this stuff to protect us from the people who want to come and steal all our resources. But the main theft of resources, it's all surrounding energy, the use of energy. If we had free energy, we'd have a free society. And we did have free energy in this last society. It's very obvious. That's why mercury's been taken off the market. You can't buy mercury anymore because a lot of the free energy devices you can create all incorporate mercury. The first flying machine was an Indian guy that was a mercury flying machine. This is before the Wright brothers, their first modern flying machine anyway. So, yeah, I mean, we're calling it Tartaria for want of a better word, but obviously there's been these resets. Something happened within the last 150 to 200 years that flooded most of the earth with a layer of mud and buried a layer of civilization. This is something that people refer to as a mud flood, for want of a better word again, just because there's evidence that this is whole layers. Even they dig in Seattle, Washington, they dig down the foundations to put in a new building, and they're finding 2 or 3 levels of accommodation and building and structures below ground level, with windows and doors and staircases and all this sort of stuff. It's not just a basement beneath a building. This is a whole nother level. Finding the same things in the Netherlands, in Russia, in China, in Melbourne, Australia. So there was something that happened that buried a layer of civilization, and then they just rewrite history and they tell us whatever they want. You get into things such as the foundlings and the orphan trains and the shipping of children all around the world. Even when you look at Australia, the colonization of Australia, look at some of the places like Port Arthur Prison. The cells are tiny, tiny little cells, just big enough for a cot and to walk around the cot. These are cells for children. And I think that they repopulated most of the world with children about 140 years ago. And it's just gone from there. And we went in and we cleaned up all these old civilizations. A really telling thing is that when you look at maps of the United States from 13 or 1400s, the whole country is mapped. And yet when you look at maps from the 1700s, the top north western section isn't mapped. So what's going on there? I think it isn't mapped in those later maps because they hadn't gone and taken over that culture yet. Now we took over this old culture, we destroyed what was left of it, and now we built this world that we've got now, which is ugly and bland and feudally based. And we're taught to respect authority, and we're taught that we need governments to protect us. And I think it's a lie. The whole thing's a lie. We used to live in a cooperative society, and we could still live in a cooperative society if people would simply believe in themselves. Like, again, this is a huge opportunity for us to shake off the chains, shake off the chains of psychological manipulation that have been put over us through this education system and the news and the media and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's gotten beyond a joke, the news and the media, what you're saying. I don't even know how people can watch it anymore. I mean, I have never owned a TV, but occasionally I go to someone's place and I catch a little bit of the news report, and it's like I'm in a kindergarten school. Like they're talking to little tiny children, trying to convince them what reality is. It's incredible. So yeah, I mean, remarkable times, brother, remarkable times. But once you see this world, and once you see what was there, and just start asking some of the most basic questions about it, well, the whole narrative starts to fall apart.
Yeah, like you said, just ask questions and it does then start to fall apart. I think the counting on people being ignorant and not sort of, well, basically keeping our attention with things that don't really matter, and the hoping we don't start asking questions. And people like me and you are obviously pariahs of this
Well, they keep
society
people,
because
you got to pay to be alive. They keep people on the edge of the poverty line and all that sort of stuff. So you're too busy. People go to work all day and they slave all day and they got to make ends meet and all that sort of stuff to get a few hours at the end of the day. They just want to kick back and sit back and watch television or whatever. They don't want to think about it too much. So that's a lot of it. That's a lot of what it's all about. Is people just don't have time to look, and this has all been created this way as well. I mean, there's no reason why you need to work your entire life and do all these things that they tell you need to do. But people believe they have to, and they believe they're going to get to that place with the two-story house and the white picket fence and 2.4 kids and the latest model car, and that's what success and that's what life is all about.
mm,
So it's we've had a number done on us, brother. We really have, and it's really difficult for people to put down that belief and put down that fear. What am I going to do if I can't pay the bills? because you don't actually own your house that you think you owned and all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, people who think they own their houses, stop paying your rates for a while and see how much you own your house, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah.
I think for some people, I mean, well, for most people, when we're talking like this, and if we're going to say to someone, listen, basically everything you believe's false, I mean, that's pretty earth-shattering. And,
Mm.
you know, I suppose it's no wonder that people can't accept it.
Well,
I
cognitive
mean,
dissonance, yeah, they don't want to. They don't
yeah,
want to believe they've been living a lie. That's why all the stuff I've done through my radio shows most of the time is to encourage people to ask questions because you can't tell people the truth. They won't believe you. It's too confronting for them. But if you can encourage them to ask the right questions, then the right answers will present themselves to them. So that's a lot of what the approach has
mm,
been that I've had to this whole thing. Sorry, I keep interrupting. I'm a bit
no, you're
vague
fine.
today, brother.
So obviously you mentioned about that mud flood, and again, when I was in Liverpool 2 days ago, one of the buildings I was looking at immediately outside the station, well, pretty much attached to the train station, and you mentioned like obviously there's buildings that have got rooms. They're not basements, the rooms. Because when I was looking at this particular one, I don't know the name of it, but that's what I was looking at. There was steps down from ground, what's now ground level, down, and this building had windows which you could see. And
Hmm.
that was my question is, it's not a basement because a basement doesn't have windows and never would have done. So why are they there? So
Exactly.
clearly it's
Well,
been built on top of something, hasn't it?
or else the ground's been raised up around us. It was built
Mm,
before. I mean, I've had places like this in Adelaide where you walk down, 10 steps to get to your doorway, and there's windows down there. There's a little, fence around the street, and your windows are down at ground level. I mean, who's going to build a place like that? Why would you build a place with windows at ground level? Wouldn't you just go up another 20 feet and rather than build it all below ground? It doesn't
mm,
make sense. You have rain come in there when it rains and all sorts of. Why would you possibly build a building like that? And once you really see this and see that it's because there's been something come over and cover that all up, and then they just block off the exits and block off the stairways and put in a new floor and put in a new road out the front and tell you that's the way it was built. But no, it wasn't. And this is all over the world. And not only that, like I said, I mean, you've seen these buildings with, as we've just described, but then there's other buildings that don't look like that. They've got nothing at ground level. But then when they dig out the building next door to put in new foundations for a new structure, they find it. They find it. There's archways and there's windows and there's doorways and sometimes 2 or 3 stories below ground.
mm,
Why is that even there? Why would you build foundations that look like that? Well, you wouldn't, because something happened which lifted the level of the ground up. The buildings didn't sink because they're still sort of straight and level. So, I mean, you question whether it was an earthquake and the building sank or whatever. But the most significant question people should be asking about it is some of these buildings, like in Holland, there's buildings that have got like 1490 or whatever on the door, indicating that's when it was built. And yet below ground, there's all of this structure there that we didn't know was there. So that would suggest that sometime in the last 600 years, there's been a major cataclysm that came across this earth and buried an entire level of civilization, an entire layer of civilization. Why isn't it in our history books? How can these buildings exist with these dates on them and not be in our history books? If we claim we know who Julius Caesar was and we know all this history back to 2000 years, well, what about this? What was the event that caused all of this stuff to be covered over with a layer of earth, and people don't know it's there? Why aren't
mm.
we taught this? So that sort of, once people see that and they just ask that one question, it sort of causes the veil to drop down a little bit, and they start questioning, yeah, well, why is this like this? And if this is like this, well, what else haven't we been told? You know?
Yeah. It's so obviously, like you said, for want of a better word, we're calling this civilization Tartaria, this group of people. Do you, I mean, I know you can't answer this for definite, but are you of the opinion that these people, they built these buildings that we've been speaking about, or do you think it's possible that even they found them and
It is
repurposed them.
possible. It is possible. Like some of the doors, you look at the evidence of giants. I would suggest that we possibly even get smaller every time there's a reset. After the next reset, perhaps the next race of humans, what's left over will only be like, 4 feet tall. Who knows? And they'll consider us to be giants. I mean, who knows? But yeah, I think it's been an ongoing process. I think that there's been many of these resets, and history's covered up each time. They go out, they repopulate the world with children. As I said, look into the foundlings and the orphan trains. The foundlings and the orphan trains is a remarkable thing. I mean, there was thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of just children just rounded up and put into camps and homes and stuff all through Europe. Where'd they all come from? Where'd all these children come from? And why were they sent out all around the world? Like there was 100,000 children sent out to Australia, 100,000 children sent out to Africa. About 300,000 children a year moved from east to west across the United States. They're having baby raffles in France in 1915. I mean, what's this all about? They repopulate the world with children. And yeah, I think it's culture upon culture upon culture, civilization upon civilization, and they just teach us whatever history they want. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't just this previous culture, but many cultures before that. I mean, I think it takes them a while to wipe out this electricity, free electricity, and just the knowledge that we had. That probably takes them a little while to do it. And we've got to kind of the final control grid now.
Mm. That orphan trains and these foundlings, what you're talking about, that's one of the most mind-blowing topics I've been thinking about recently. Like you're saying, repopulating the world, and then you think, well, what happened to the parents? And then you think, well, what about these asylums? Would they putting their parents in asylums and taking the
Well,
children?
anybody who had the old knowledge, they put them in a mental asylum
Yeah.
because obviously you're crazy. We don't want this getting out to people. And I even speculate on I mean, the underground bases that we know are there. There's big, huge underground military bases right across the United States. I'm sure they're across Europe, probably in England as well. And when you look at the timeline we're given for the Industrial Revolution, a couple of 100 years ago, we started, figuring out this stuff and we started building all this incredible stuff. Do people seriously believe that in the last couple of 100 years we had the technology to build these big underground bases, or were they already there? What culture built those big underground bases, and is that where the foundlings come from? You got a question. I mean, things like the Cabbage Patch Kids, the stuff like the World Fairs where they had all the babies in incubators 100 years ago, 120 years ago. Aren't we told incubators are a recent invention? How come they had all of these premature babies in incubators enough to have a display at a World Fair? Where'd they all come from? Why were there so many premature babies? And where did all these incubators come from? And why were they raffling them off? Why could you go into a World Fair and you could purchase a baby?
Mm.
Where'd they all come from? What it's all about? What's going on with the Cabbage Patch Kids and all of these things that we're told? Even the stories of Tom and the Water Babies and all the stories that we get of all these orphans everywhere a couple of 100 years ago or 100 years ago. Where did they all come from? It's an interesting question. Were their parents all killed, or were they cloned? Did they grow them? I mean, what's going on here? What don't we know? And you've got to be prepared to consider these type of possibilities. Might sound really far-fetched and strange to people, but you've got to look at all of this stuff with an open mind and just lead where the research leads you. Just go where the research leads you. And all these questions are valid questions. I mean, they're talking about cloning and all sorts of things they're doing now. Well, could they do that back then? Is that where they all came from? You really got to wonder. It's remarkable, the stories of the
Mm.
foundlings and the orphan trains. This is something that I spoke about on my radio shows maybe, I don't know, eight years ago or something like that. I started talking about these sorts of things. And again, you begin to look at the old world and you got this concept of what it is. When I was younger, I mean, I went through trying to look at history and trying to figure out, how they built these things and why things are the way they are. But I always thought the timeline was correct. Yeah, once you factor in the possibility that the timeline's been completely manufactured, the timeline isn't correct. Stuff that we thought was thousands of years old isn't. It's just hundreds of years old. Everything really begins to make sense.
Mm. There's, I don't know whether you've heard of this theory, but it's a peripheral theory within some Christians are sort of propagating this online, and it's one I'm going to speak to someone about. It's not at this moment in time. It's not something I think. Well, I'm not going to say I don't think it's true, but because I don't know enough about it. But when you mentioned about sort of the timeline, this is why I'm bringing this up. So it's called Satan's Little Season, and basically what it is when you read Revelation, it talks about a millennial reign of Christ, and then it says that after this, there'll be that Satan was bound in the abyss for 1,000 years, and then for a little time, a little season, it says he'll be released. So the theory is that Christ has actually returned. This is the theory. I don't know. I mean, there's people out there who have been doing videos on this online, so I'm just giving you a brief sort of outline. But when you mentioned about the timeline, this is why I'm saying it. And they're saying there's 1,000 years missing, and the reason for it is Christ returned. He ruled for 1,000 years, and then now we're living in Satan's little season until the final battle. So the question is, if this is the case, if we're in this little season because Satan's deceived the whole world, that's what it talks about. Who are we? Like, who are we? And this is like a big thing at the minute on YouTube. And I've got a guest coming on, but they're saying that there's 1,000 years missing. Who
Well, there's at
knows?
least 1,000 years missing. I mean, if you look at Scaligerian history that was composed by the Vatican, there's at least 1,000 years history. But I would suggest even that is a red herring. I mean, thinking that, well, the Dark Ages is 1,000 years history, a lot of stuff we don't know about. What if the timeline's wrong? What if it wasn't 1,000 years? What if stuff, like I said, that they tell you happened 1,000 years ago only happened 100 years ago? What if even the war of Genghis Khan, the war of Napoleon, and even the war of Troy, which we're told happened, a couple of hundred years BC, what if they all happened contemporaneously? And this was the war to destroy the remnants of what we're calling Tartaria. What if it only happened a few hundred years ago? What if the Battle of Troy and the Napoleonic War and the battles of Genghis Khan all happened contemporaneously? That would be an interesting way of looking at things. I think it's far more than a missing 1,000 years in the timeline. I think it's all fabricated. Like I said, everything prior to 100 years ago, anything that exists outside living memory, basically, has been fabricated. As for the whole Satan season, I mean, we're certainly seeing that. I mean, but I think Satan is simply a corruption of human consciousness. I don't think it's this big evil man with a pitchfork and devil horns. Same as I think the return of Christ is the return of Christ consciousness. I think people are too caught up in waiting for some particular hero to arrive and save them, so they'll never have to exercise their own power. And even if you want to look at the Bible, I mean, Christ basically said, if you think I'm fantastic, wait till you see what you can do. But nobody really takes that on board for themselves. I think the whole religious concept, I mean, I just don't do religion at all. I think a lot of it has been designed to lead you away from God. I'm sure there's pearls of wisdom in there, but there's also, a lot of dependency. There's a lot of seeds of supremacy in all religion, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Christian. We're all told that we need to tolerate the other religions, but you're the one who's got it right. You're the one who's going to go to heaven, not the other guys. You've got to tolerate the other guys, but you're the one who's got it right. So there's that seed of supremacy in all of it, taken to the nth degree with Judaism, what these people are doing to the world. But even, I mean, these people who actually wrote the Bible, which was changed by King James. King James mistranslated a whole bunch of words in there. The whole concept of the Jews and the Goyim was never in the original Hebrew Bible. Goyim referred to, or the Gentiles referred to as the real translation is nations. So even when you look at that, if you look at the Bible and what it says, the God's chosen people, the Israelites, are those who followed the same teachings as the man called Israel. It wasn't anything about the modern crop of Jews in the state of Israel. It's a completely different thing. These are not the Israelites or the Jews of the Bible. And what they basically referred to as Jews and Gentiles, which was basically Judan or Judahites and nations. Okay, the Gentiles were nations, and the Judahites were those who believed in no nation but followed the teachings of the one true creator, whatever that is. So when you look at that now, what are we doing? We're giving our power to the nations as the Gentiles, because when they made Jews and Gentiles, they kind of made it into racial identities. You've got the Jews and the non-Jews, and they're race specific. It wasn't about that. It was about a mindset. It was those who believed in the teachings of the one true creator, the connection to the divine that they had, and those who followed the laws of the nations. The laws of the nations, you would say, well, this is Satan, this is satanic, because they've moved away from the teachings of the one true creator. They don't believe in themselves anymore. They believe in what these constructs, which is what they are, a nation, the whole laws of all this stuff, the governments, all this sort of gubermente, government, mind control. It's all mind control. So I think that's what the satanic force or the satanic influence is. It's our belief in the nations over our belief in ourselves. So your belief in yourself, belief in your connection to the divine, which we all have. This is Christ, and that's what Christ tried to tell people, I would suggest. I think that, I mean, a lot of people will hate what I've said because they want to believe in the book, they want to believe in the Vatican, they want to wear their little cross around and think everything's going to be great and this guy's going to come back and save them. When what makes them think that they're even worthy of salvation when they've never lifted a finger to help themselves? They're not even lifted a finger to point this system out as the control grid that it is. They've never taken responsibility for anything, and yet they believe they're worth saving because they believe what's in this book, which was written by these Jewish people, which is a control mechanism to stop you ever standing up, to stop you ever believing in yourself, to put this fear of death into you, when death is the only part of life which is inevitable. I mean, we all came here to die. It's what you do with your time here, what energy state you're in when you leave this realm. I would suggest that most of this life is simply an exam to see how much of your soul you're willing to give away. Which every time you put a mask on and comply with these mask mandates and these vaccine mandates, every time you comply with a piece of legislation which causes you to step outside your moral compass, you've given away a little bit more of your soul. Is that what belief in the nation is? Is that what it means to be a Gentile? So you got to really look at things a little deeper, I would suggest, with people. Sure, there's people who've come along. I mean, and even Jesus Christ, he exists in the Quran as well. He's seen as one of the greatest prophets. The Islamic people are waiting for his return as well. It's the same, pretty much the same as Christianity. The only real difference between Islam and Christianity is that Christianity says Christ was the Son of God, and Islam says he was a prophet, one of many prophets. And there's a bit of a, you know,
That's a
they fight
major
that
difference,
sort of
though.
stuff. Well, it's a
That's a
major
major
difference, yeah.
difference.
But
Yeah.
what do the
I mean,
Jews say? The Jews, we say we're Judeo-Christian. What do the Jews say? They say Christ was a traitor, and at the
of course they
moment
do.
he's
Yeah.
in hell, burning in a vat of hot excrement as he deserves, and they
Mm.
hate him. You
Yeah, they
know,
do. Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
either way, again, it gets down to this belief. People are going to argue over the detail of whether he was the Son of God or whether he was a prophet. What if we're all the Son of God? What if we're all the children of God? What if we're all connected to this divine source? So, I mean, there's a different way of looking at it. If you can be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be, do not tolerate wrong behavior. Like he went into the temples and overturned the tables of the money changers and all this sort of stuff. What Christ did was he operated totally within his moral compass the whole time. If we do that, we will change the world. We don't have to build a new system. We don't have to change anything else but what is in our hearts and what is our perspective and how we relate to the people around us. That's what will change the world. But people aren't prepared to do that. They think they can just keep going on with their mundane lives, believe what's in the book, and this guy's going to come and save them. They
Mm.
don't. I don't think they get it. I don't think they understand. But that's just my perspective. And hey, yeah, we could be living in that time, but that time, that Satan's little playground time, It's simply our belief in authority, our belief in this system, which is a complete fiction. It's just the idea that the system is real. That's what the Matrix is. It's your belief that these governments have control over you. But like I said, even if they did, even if that authority was valid in some way, well, in the last 4 or 5 years, they've abdicated that privilege to govern. Look what they've done. They've killed so many people with this vaccine, with this jab. They were getting people telling you can't see your grandparents. They're putting them in nursing homes, putting them on remdesivir, and then killing them on ventilators. They murdered so many people through this jab. They've murdered
Mm.
so many people through these wars. And now they're basically getting people to do it to themselves. Put your mask on, deprive yourself of oxygen, take this death shot and do what you're told. Don't think outside the box. Don't step outside the lines. We need to know everything about you. Put in this surveillance system and all this sort of shit. This is all because people choose to comply with it because they don't believe in themselves. So yeah, it's and then they put it in the Bible or Revelations. All this bad stuff's going to happen. So people sit back and they just let it happen. Oh, it's all
Mm.
prophesized. There's nothing I can do about it. If I just let it happen and believe in the book, then this guy's going to ascend from the sky on a flaming pie and he's going to save the world. I don't actually have to do anything. That's what has been put into people's minds. And if people simply
Mm.
were to change their perspective and walk the path that he walked, they change the world. I mean, how many Christians do you know who actually walk the path of Christ? I don't know any.
Well, this is the problem. You see, we can't. So when we talk about Christianity, obviously you've got different versions of it, and I mean, there's the true teachings of the Bible, and then there's people who manipulate things, and there's certain things that are fundamental and certain things that are peripheral. And the actual massive difference between, for example, what I believe and what every other religion believes is that every other religion tells you, whatever you do, you can work, as long as you pray so many times and you fast and you do these things, you can earn your favor with God. But the true message of Christianity is that actually you can earn favor with God because we're all fallen human beings. This is why we're in this state now. And that Christ is the Son of God. He's the second person of the Trinity who took on flesh to be our savior. So that's the difference. And we can't do anything, but it's faith in what he's done for us, which is a free gift. He's offering it to us freely. But no one can live like him because he was the only perfect man that there's ever lived. He was displaying um perfection, how someone can be perfect. And you get people questioning, oh, well, was he a real person? Well, that actual question would be something that someone on the lunatic fringe would be asking, because the reality is we know that he was a real person. The real question is, who was he? That's
Mm.
it.
Well,
I
he doesn't
don't
have any
think.
history outside the Bible, it was interesting, but
Well, he has
um,
he has history. Tacitus wrote about him. Pliny the Younger, Josephus wrote about him. There is extra biblical sources about him and unfriendly sources as well that talk about him. Um, Particularly Tacitus, because he was a Roman who clearly wasn't a Christian, wasn't a believer, and he spoke about him, but not in friendly terms. But the fact that he was a real person, it was just like a matter of a fact. And you mentioned before about Israel, and you made a valid point where you said that these people that are there now, they're not the Israelites, and that's true, because
mm,
most of them aren't Semites, and
no.
they're not to be a Semite, you have to be a descendant of Shem, and most of them aren't. So, I mean, this is something I've become more aware of over the last few years, and in particular since they've basically leveled Gaza, which is horrific. Um, and the problem I see with people is what they're doing is, particularly over here as well, the far right, they're looking at these extreme sides of it, like Hamas or whatever. They're labeling everyone with that label. Therefore, leveling Gaza's fine. Well, it's
Mm.
not fine because they're human beings. We're not, obviously we know there is some, if you want to call them terrorists amongst them. Yeah, we know that. But they're leveling the place, and they're bombing babies and everything. I mean,
I
that's
think the
just.
terrorists is Israel. I think Israel is a terrorist state. It's a
Mm,
fake country. It's a false country occupied and by fake Jews. and it's a blight on the world. I mean, the state of Israel and these so-called modern Jews, if you go and look at World War One, World War Two, they've been responsible for almost every conflict that we've had in the last 150 years, if not all of them, and
Mm.
probably even going before that as well. And it's disgraceful what's going on in Palestine. I've said before, it's the greatest moral dilemma that we face in the world today. And if we cannot look within ourselves enough to heal the moral dilemma that is Palestine, then the way of Palestine will be the way of the world. What's going on there now shows a complete disregard for human life, a complete disregard for what is good or decent or wholesome in any way, shape, or form. Under the guise of protecting the world from terrorists, they are carrying out some of the worst terrorist atrocities we've ever seen. And they've been subjecting these people to these atrocities for 76 years now. They've been resisting the theft of their country and the theft of their lives and the dehumanization of the Palestinian people. Hamas is an Israeli creation. Even Bibi Netanyahu said how they've got to keep Hamas well funded. It's important to keep Hamas well funded in order to prevent the ever rise of a Palestinian state, because that way they can name Hamas as a terrorist organization, give all the money they need to them so they can do these things. The whole October 7th thing, I mean, Israel stood down. They knew about the plans to do this 2 years before they did it. I mean, the whole thing's completely contrived. And it shows that all our Western governments are in support of this. This new parasite that you got there now, Keir Starmer, this
Mm.
man is an absolute abomination. This man is a full-blown psychopath. I saw an interview with him just yesterday where he was talking about, they're saying, oh, what's your red line for Israel? And he basically said he doesn't have one. Israel has the right to defend itself. It was subject to the worst terror attack. With 200 hostages that are being held, how can you say they don't have a right to defend themselves? Well, what about the 10,000 Palestinian hostages that are held in Israeli jails without charge or trial, many of them children? I mean, why is there no mention of this? Oh, because of
Mm.
Hamas. Hamas is an
Mm.
Israeli creation. This whole thing is a puppet show, and they're basically showing you what they have in store for you. And with what they're doing right now, breaking down the food chain, telling us we've got to protect the world against climate change, all this sort of stuff, it's all complete rubbish. We're heading for Holodomor 2.0, which will be a worldwide starvation. And this was all run by the same people again. If you really look at in the last 150 years, there's around about 262 million people that have been killed by this particular group of fake Jews who are now populating Israel, which is, as I said, a terrorist state. It has no right to exist. The people who are running it have no right to be running that region of the world. They have no connection to it whatsoever. They are not Semites. They're not real Jews. And all of this is being supported by our governments. Again, that shows you where the remedy lies. If people within our nations, within our states, would withdraw support from these politicians, we could change the world ourselves. We don't need anyone to come along and do it for us. And we could create the world that we want if people would simply believe in themselves and believe in the power that they've got and believe, question authority, just question the authority of these people. Because like I said before, even if they had any authority, they've abdicated their privilege in the last 5 years anyway. So a big wake up is needed, my friend,
Yeah,
which is why we do
absolutely.
what we do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's it's something that's become more apparent, the dehumanization of these Palestinians, and that's what they do. And I totally agree with you. Hamas is an Israeli creation. They absolutely knew about the October 7th. If you can't see that, you just well, you're
Hmm.
just being willfully blind again. I mean, I've had guests on here who I've spoken to about it, and one in particular, I'm not mentioning any names, and he didn't agree. And I thought pro Israeli guy, but I just thought to myself, you can't. You're being willful now because it's just blatantly obvious. If you like we've said before, if you've got the eyes to see these things, it is blatantly obvious how they could breach that border when they've got this iron dome, and if a little bird landed on that fence, the
Hmm.
alarms were going off, and they had soldiers, and they were all stood down. It's just obvious, and it's tragic, and unfortunately, like you said, we have got a parasite now of a prime minister, and it's shocking what he said. Um, and I just can't. It's when you look at the way everything's going, people are just. You tell them, I've said to people, look, we're heading for war. They want a war with Russia. They're
Oh
pushing for
yeah,
that. I mean,
absolutely.
he's authorized. Keir Starmer within a week has authorized so they're using these. I think they're called Star Seeker missile, something, some missiles we've provided to Ukraine. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact name of them. But basically, he's authorized the Ukraine now to not just use them in Ukraine, but to use them long distance into Russia. I mean, if that's not a massive escalation, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and people don't understand the whole situation there. I mean, it isn't like Putin just woke up one morning and thought, right, I'm going to invade Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine didn't even exist as a country before like 1990 or 1991 or something like that. And
Mm.
most of the people in there are Russian. And it's crazy. It's really crazy. And Zelensky is this homosexual puppet actor. He gets out on stage and dances around and plays the piano with his penis. I mean, this is who we're supporting. It's just unbelievable. And they're saying we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. They're sending everybody they can to the front to just be killed. It's depopulation. And again, if you start looking at the fake Jews of Israel, a lot of them are probably Khazarians, and this is where they come from, is Ukraine, and they're all moving back there and repopulating. It's been like 400,000 people leave Israel and go to Ukraine in the last year or so. I mean, if Ukraine was really a war zone, why would these people be going there and doing that?
Mm.
And they're just pushing Russia and trying to create more and more conflict. And again, it's about depopulation. That's what it's all about. That's what all these wars are about. Depopulation under the guise of war, which is a complete joke. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's shocking, absolutely shocking, and the fact that they're supporting this, they're also milking the economy of all the countries. I mean, even all the missiles, they're saying, yeah, we're going to send all these missiles to Ukraine. Really, they just give Ukraine a blank check, and then Ukraine comes and spends that money on British weapons companies and on US weapons companies who all lobby the politicians, and it all gets filtered back to the country that gives them the money. The United States gives Ukraine $1.6 billion for weapons. They don't send a pallet of money over there. They just give him a
No.
blank check. And then he spends all that money on at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, buying all their old stock that the United States makes so many weapons. And they got a shelf life, these things. So we'll send all of our old stock over to Zelensky. We'll milk the wealth of the US economy through Ukraine back to the weapons companies and back to the politicians, and send all of our old stock over to Ukraine. Zelensky puts it all in a stockpile somewhere, and then Putin comes along and bombs it. Oh, we need more weapons. It's a scam, and they're doing it to all of Europe. They're doing it to England. They're doing it to Canada. They're milking the economies out. And while they're doing this, they're telling us, oh, we've got to stop farming. We've got to stop growing food, or you're all going to starve. Think about that one. And people go, oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
They're milking the wealth of the economies. They're breaking down food production, and they're creating an excuse for the world to basically implode and say, oh, it was Russia. It's because Russia invaded Ukraine. It's ridiculous. They're saying we've got to protect Ukrainian autonomy or the world's going to collapse. But meanwhile, they're taking away the autonomy from every country in Europe, bringing them all into the European Union, which is
Yeah.
just being used to drain them of all their wealth and launder it back to themselves through Ukraine. So yeah, it's a joke. But again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It becomes completely obvious what's actually going on here once you look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've touched on a lot of interesting topics tonight, Max. It's been brilliant talking to you. Fascinating stuff. I'm sure people are gonna love listening to what you've had to say. But before we sort of just bring this to an end, could you just let people know where they can sort of touch base with you? Because I know you've got a website. Just tell people what you're up to.
Well, yeah, I've got a website called thecrowhouse.com. You can go there. And I mean, I'm banned most places. I'm banned on YouTube, banned on Facebook, like everywhere. LinkedIn, Getter, MeWe, SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeart. Pretty well banned everywhere. But if you go to thecrowhouse.com, click on the face to enter, you'll see the links to my stuff there. And I know I may have offended a few people or whatever with what I say about religion and stuff, but I mean, this is just me, and we've got to be open to discussing these things. People have got to,
Yeah.
you've got to be prepared to, because I don't believe anything. I think that belief is the enemy of knowledge. That once you know something, it doesn't require any belief. And when you know something in your heart, well, you know it. You know, you don't have to question it or whatever. It just, but you got to, even with that, you got to be prepared to think outside the box. If you start believing things, or that belief affects the way you look at everything else, when if you get enough information come to you, then the truth just presents itself and suddenly you know it. It doesn't require belief. But you've got to be open to changing your perspective and changing your mind. Nothing that I would say is set in stone. And I'm quite prepared to change my opinion on just about anything at any moment. As soon as information comes to me and I go, well, that resonates, I'm quite happy to change my opinion. So I think it's important for people to keep an open mind, but more than anything, people have got to realize that we are the ones who hold the key to getting ourselves out of this mess. We got ourselves into this mess by our belief in authority. If we can change that belief and start believing in ourselves a little bit, the whole facade breaks down. And we are in a time when I believe we could actually regain control of this world and lead ourselves back to where we should be. Perhaps find out what history really was. Perhaps find out about all these lies and just be free to explore and live the fullest of our potential. Be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be, and you'll change the world. And I think we all have the ability to do that. But yeah, thanks for having me on, brother. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you. You know, everyone's different. You know, not everyone I have on here believes, well, no one I have on here believes everything I believe, and I'm sure I don't believe everything they believe. We're all different. But you know, we've all got the same goals, which is to sort of talk about things that people aren't talking about and expose the lies. That's what we're doing. You're doing it, I'm doing it, and the more of us that do it, the better. So if you just stay on for 1 minute, Max, while I close this out. So I'd like to thank you for being on here. And guys, you know, I always get people on who's done a lot of research. As you can tell, Max has done a lot of research. You might not agree with some of the things he said, but he's done his research. And we're thankful for people like Max doing that. He's doing the same as me. He's getting the message out there. He's trying to expose the darkness and sort of point us, you know, and say, listen, why don't you think about this and ask these questions? So it's all good. We need to question everything. I think that's the message Max would sort of send out as well. He's questioning everything. And it's been fascinating talking to Max. So, guys, I'll be back next week with a new guest. I'm Paul, and this is Beyond the Paradigm.